Secular Experience, Navigating AA in a Secular Way. On the last Sunday of every month, we're going to have different speakers or panels sharing their own experience, strength, and hope for about 30 to 45 minutes, depending on how many speakers there are, about getting and staying sober in a secular way. The workshops are recorded. It's being recorded now as we speak, and we post the audio on our YouTube channel, so you can check the chat for the links. And the group would like to thank the Beyond Belief group for letting us use their Zoom room. By the way, during the speaker portion, I'll turn off the chat function, so you'll only be able to interact with the hosts in case there's a problem or something. We'll open it back up after the speakers have concluded their remarks, and we'll open for sharing for about an hour. We do ask you to keep your microphone muted at that time, unless it's your turn to share. And also we ask that you use the raised hand function during that portion, so I can call on people in order. During the sharing, you're welcome to ask questions or share your own perspective or experience on the topics presented. Would someone think for us? What I've got is a Bill Wilson quote. I have a volunteer.
I'll do it, John. Carol
Thank
here.
you, Carol.
In AA, we are supposed to be bound together in the kingship of a universal suffering. Therefore, the full liberty to practice any creed or principle or therapy should be a first consideration. Hence, let us not pressure anyone with individual or even collective views. Let us instead accord to each other the respect that is due to every human being as he tries to make his way towards the light. Let us always try to be inclusive rather than exclusive. Let us remember that each alcoholic among us is a member of AA, so long as he or she so declares. From Bill Wilson's 1965 address to General Service Conference.
All right, thank you. As freethinkers, we aspire to open-mindedness and to appreciating the sharing of others, particularly those with whom we disagree. So we ask only that everyone share without attempting to dissuade or argue or disrespect anyone else or their beliefs. As a group, we're secular. That is, we don't endorse or oppose any system of belief, and we don't have any quarrel with any form of religion. We also don't use prayers of any kind in our workshops or in our meetings. Our only wish is to assure suffering alcoholics that they can find sobriety in AA without having to accept anyone else's belief or having to deny their own. Today, our workshop features Riley C. and Suzanne P. from our regular membership at the Freethinkers Living Sober Group. They're going to share for about 15 minutes or so on their perspective of working the steps in a secular way. I have another quote I'd like to share on the screen first. There we go. Would someone care to read it, or shall I? Anybody want to volunteer?
I'd be happy to.
Thank you, Kenji.
To begin with, the steps are not enforceable upon anyone. They are only suggestions. A belief in the steps or in God is not in any way requisite for AA membership. Therefore, we have no means of compelling anyone to stay away from AA because he does not believe in God or the 12 steps. In fact, AA has a technique for reducing rebellion among doubting people by deliberately inviting them to disagree with everything we believe in. Bill W. in, quote, a letter to Father Ford, unquote, May 4th, 1957.
All right, thank you. That's a quote I'd really like to see people read a lot. Okay, so our first speaker, oh, I hope I got this right, is going to be Suzanne. Am I right, Suzanne? Oh, Riley. See, I got it wrong. I wouldn't want anybody to think I have all my ducks in a row. Riley, you're up. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me. So I'm Riley. I'm a rapacious fiend. I mean, I think I'm more than qualified to be here. I am predominantly a drug addict, but I do mostly come to AA meetings just because there's a lot more variety because it's been around for a longer time. Um, I was actually, I've been at a very, I don't know, I would say kind of a peak in my work with the steps lately. And so I was particularly, I don't know, I feel very privileged to be able to talk about this today, just because, at least for me personally, I've been using the steps, one, to stay sober, but also to kind of address another problem I've had, which is behavioral addiction and behavioral compulsion. And the way I do that is not really through God. It's not really through. Um, I do, I do work with an idea, a conception of a higher power, but the steps have allowed me to get deeper into. I mean, what made drugs and alcohol so appealing to me, but also to let's just say it's been. I lacked a lot of awareness in the past, and that awareness caused me to feel this need to run from things and behaviors and I would say behaviors and drugs and alcohol were how I did that and how I continue to do that, except minus the drugs and alcohol as I have some clean time now. But I just wanted to go over at least what the process looked like for me to get me from where I was to where I am now, which is at a huge crossroads. And so when I first got into recovery, when I first got sober, the way that I managed to stay clean was by heavily throwing myself in to behavioral addictions, such as language learning for me is a big one. Um, I have a couple that I kind of go back and forth from: language learning, chess, music, and painting. And when I get into these things, I treat it with the same intensity that I treated using. And for a long time, especially in early recovery, it really served me just to be able to completely tune out the world, tune out relationships, tune out everything, and dive into these tasks with the same intensity that I brought to my addiction. And of course, what inspired that was that I had not yet had the opportunity to do the work to get to a point where I could actually reconcile with my past and figure out what it was that I felt like I needed to be running from. So the first three steps for me, I use those every day in the beginning to keep myself sober. Primarily just reminding myself, as part of the way that I work the first step, I just try and go over all of the different ways, basically the feelings within myself that used to inspire me to want to use drugs and alcohol. And I don't really focus on the events. I don't really focus on the specific consequences that I was feeling, but I focus on what it was within me that caused me to want to hurt people in that way and caused me to want to hurt myself in that way. And that's brought me a lot of, I mean, the first step alone brought me a lot of clarity that later came out on my fourth step. And then in my eighth and ninth steps that, I don't know, have caused tremendous change in me as a person. The second and third steps, I mean, my opinion on them changes every day, and the way that I work them changes every day. I've tried a lot of things to make those steps work for me, and what I'm sitting on now, and what has been working for me for the past while, has just been each day I have a choice of am I going to stay sober today by working my program, or am I going to stay sober today by engaging in one of my behavioral addictions until I mean, I'm sober physically, but I'm not emotionally sober whatsoever. So in that way, I do kind of turn it over to AA when I do make the right choice and work my program that day. But I don't know, those as far as I mean, coming to admit that a power greater than myself can relieve me of all that. I mean, it takes constant effort from me not to just drown myself out in some kind of a behavior. And I haven't felt at any point, no matter how hard I've tried, that like just something would take that away from me, because it's a behavior that's I've been doing since I was probably 3 years old. And I mean, I was an addict before I ever came near drugs or alcohol. So the second and third steps are a great mystery to me. The thing that I do consistently do though, until I don't know, someday I might have closure on them, is I try to interpret them. I try to rewrite them. I've tried many times to rewrite them. I just keep thinking about it because I know there's something there that I can take away from it. And I've also looked at many alternatives to them in other books, and tried to work them that way as well. But ultimately, that's just something that has been evolving as much as I have in my recovery. So maybe someday I'll know exactly how I feel about that. But for now, I just stay conscious of them and try and make that decision each day to be here and do things like this rather than in my family we call my behavioral obsession squirrels because because it's like a dog when it sees a squirrel. Like I can't stop. I have to chase the squirrel. So, so to avoid one of my squirrels. But another term for them, I think, is special interests, which is something my girlfriend has made me pretty conscious of. That there's a term within the autistic community to refer to something that you depend on to kind of escape from reality. And I don't know how much I have in common with that group, but I don't know. That's one way for I've also heard to describe it. So all that aside, the fourth step I think is this is one of my favorite things that I've ever encountered in my life because it's brought when I first got into recovery, I had no idea that this behavioral problem was even a problem until I worked a number of fourth steps. Until, I mean, I don't ever really, I don't think I'll ever really consider the fourth step something that I'm finished with, just because this step requires no like emotional or mental finagling for me to get something out of. I just have to be able to be willing to reflect. And I mean, the amount of things that I just became aware of, and some of the problems that I had, like superficial jealousy and anger and all those other feelings that I could also use to escape from what was bothering me. A lot of those things I don't struggle with so much anymore. But the deeply ingrained behaviors, I think just having been made aware of them and writing out how they affect me in my daily life and affect other people predominantly, because that's who it really hurts. Um, that consciousness has given me at least the idea that maybe a change is possible and I don't have to continue living like that. But the fifth, sixth, and seventh steps for me, I mean, I don't think that there's going to be any experience where I humbly ask God to remove this from me because or I just don't think this is something that is going to be magically taken away because that's just not been my experience. I have tried so many different ways to bring myself into the moment, to consistently be present, and there are a few that work for me consistently. One of them is being social, and one of them is being around other people because when I'm around other people and I'm having a good time, I don't deep end in my head like that, and that's been one of the solutions that the fourth step brought to me. But yeah, it pretty much takes a consistent effort every day on my part not to fall into doing that and to stay emotionally sober that day because I'm 20 years old. It's 20 years of consistently learned behavior that I fear that if I don't shed now, at some point my brain will tell me that I will get to a point where I'm so worked up about one of these things that I end up using again, which is a huge fear of mine. And so my fourth step, I mean, it illustrated a lot of things to me that I just simply was not conscious of, because I mean, since I was a very young, since I was very, very young, I've always struggled a lot socially. I've always struggled a lot emotionally, and I very quickly developed this habit of of my personal way of tuning the world out, and just the fact that I'm cognizant of that now, that it's something that I do for that reason. It's something that I do in order not to acknowledge my past, in order not to acknowledge, just not to have to worry about things that are real in my life. Um, just having that knowledge now it's given me the opportunity at least to recognize that it's possible to change from that and it's possible to choose to be present. And I don't know without the steps how I would have gotten there because I could have stayed sober just by painting all day or learning languages like until I can't sleep because I can't, it hurts to think in English. And I can stay sober that way and I have, but it's no better than using. So I don't know, this clarity is something that I'm very thankful for. And then this brings me to I mean, what I've been doing lately is I've been making an effort to really get through. I thought in the past that just by living differently and having read the 12 and 12 on the eighth and ninth steps that I had gotten through that. But I realized lately that I don't entirely understand my past. I understand how I felt a little bit, but I don't understand how I made other people feel. So I've been working on a very detailed list of all the people who I think I've hurt, and a lot of them were people who I just decided that I didn't ever have to worry about again, because I mean, if I have a behavioral addiction going on, I can just run and run forever from whatever it is that's bothering me. But the eighth step has made me actually have to confront the fact that my life is not separate, a bunch of separate little sagas. Like it's one continuous story, and the people that were hurt at different places along the way, I mean, they're not disappearing. There are a lot of them still out there. And if I'm suffering because I'm unable to, I don't want to leave my house, or I don't want to see certain people, or I want to avoid certain crowds just because I'm not willing to address within myself why I hurt them. The fourth step taught me why I hurt them, and the eighth and ninth, I just have to make up for that. And I want to be free of all these things, because what I've concluded within myself is that the reason why I have such a hard time staying present, and why I have such a hard time with like the spiritual aspects of this program, is because there were a number of issues within my past that inspired that behavior then and inspire my new coping mechanisms now. So I really want to shed that, because I don't know, at least the reason why I love this meeting so much, why I love the people from the Freethinkers Agnostics meeting so much, is that there's a lot of old people who I see sitting there with decades and decades of sobriety, who I see sitting there not twitching, not moving, just completely relaxed and there and present, and not worrying about what else they can be doing in that moment. And I don't know, when I see that, it gives me a ton of hope, because I still struggle so much just to get through one meeting without turning my camera off and running around a little bit, and just finding something else to worry about, because I don't know. My hypothesis right now, what I'm working with, is that I have been running from the damage that I did while using the entirety of my time while using, and I very superficially, or the entirety of my time while being sober, and I very superficially thought that just by living differently, just by not hurting people like that, currently, people would just all forget about what happened. But you can't forget. You can't afford to forget. And I don't know, the person that I was in the beginning of my sobriety versus the person who actually understands these things about himself. Like, it doesn't take for me I don't have to reword these steps. I don't have to worry so much about the God thing. I mean, it's very clear tasks that I can do for myself to get past these behaviors that are holding me back. And ultimately that threaten my chances of long-term sobriety, which is what I desire for myself. And I don't know, because I still have so many developing opinions about the steps and the wording of the steps, and because I'm in these meetings where everybody has a different book that they read, and everybody has a different way that they work it, and what's the wrong and the right way and all that. I mean, I've been exposed to a lot of information, and my process and my strategy has been to work what makes sense to me, which is the introspection steps. That's what makes sense to me. And that's where I don't have to worry about rewording, and that's where I get a ton without having to get all caught up in what I do or do not believe in. Because at the end of the day, it's clear to me that I have behavioral issues that affect my relationships, that affect my chances at long-term sobriety, and that affect my happiness overall. Like the fact that sometimes I can't sit still, I can't sit there without my headphones on and just wait, or just sit, because I need to have something coming in. And it took me forever to get here, but like the past that I've been running from is a pretty brutal one. And over the past couple weeks, I mean, I've been hearing from other people who lived that with me, the way that I've affected them, and I've been hearing their side of the story. And like it's really brutal, because the way that I understood my past, and the way that I understood my behavior while using previous to now, was simply that it was bad. Simply that I was a bad person then, and I did bad things and hurt people because I was a bad person. And that was very comforting for me, because I can say, well, I'm not a bad person anymore. Isn't that sweet? Isn't that nice? But it's a much more complicated picture than that. It's a much more complicated picture than that. And I don't know that I think therapy, I think any number of things could have led me to these conclusions, maybe in a more comfortable way. But the brutality of the brutality of having to confront these things. I mean, there's no point in my sobriety where I think it was going to be comfortable for me to confront these things. Because without confronting these things, I don't think I would have ever been able to get to that point. So I work what works for me within these steps. I don't look for problems. I don't look for excuses. I don't need to find 100 different versions. I mean, I work with a sponsor from traditional AA, and although he's very progressive on his views of what a higher power means and all that, um, he and also does emphasize a lot of the steps that I still struggle to kind of comprehend and get anything out of. But I don't know. At least working with him, I don't need to It's important for me at least to have a sponsor who understands that like I'm not entirely comfortable with a lot of with some of the concepts within particularly 2, 3, and 6 and 7, and he puts no force on me to have a certain idea of those things. So I don't know, at least within traditional AA, it doesn't like people. I mean, the people that you work with and the people that you surround yourself are the people whose recovery you end up emulating, I think. And because at least in traditional AA, before I found this group, I surrounded myself with people who on the continuum of there to here were closer on this side. Um, I don't know. I found that a lot of my problems with the steps were pretty easily addressed just by just skipping to the introspection stuff because that's what that's what really has served me and that's what's caused a huge change within me. How long have I been going?
Probably long enough.
Long enough? Okay. And then of course the last 3 steps. I'm gonna sum it up right now. I just say yes when people ask me to do things for AA. I like being here today. I didn't feel entirely qualified, but hopefully hopefully I've been helpful to you in some way. Um, I don't know. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who struggle with behavioral problems as well once they get into sobriety. And I don't know. The steps have done a lot more than just keep me sober, I think. So I'll stop for now. Thank you guys.
Thank you very much, Riley.
Thank you, Riley.
Thank you, Riley.
Excellent. Excellent,
Fantastic.
Charlie.
Thank you, Riley.
That was really great. I have one more little reading here if somebody would like to volunteer to read it. Anybody at all?
Catherine.
I can do it.
Oops. I think Catherine
Yeah, go
jumped
ahead.
in there.
Okay, yep. I'm Catherine, alcoholic. To some of us, the idea of substituting good for God in the 12 steps will seem like a watering down of AA's message. We must remember that AA's steps are suggestions only. A belief in them as they stand is not at all a requirement for membership among us. This liberty has made AA available to thousands who never would have tried it all, had we insisted on the 12 steps just as written. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our second speaker, Suzanne.
Hi, everybody. I'm Suzanne, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Suzanne.
Thank you for asking me to speak today. Hi. Riley, at your age, I wish I had the insight and the motivation that you do. So that was a fantastic share. Thank you for that. Unfortunately, I did not, at your age, have that kind of insight. My sobriety date is August 31st, 2017. I am an agnostic, so I am a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. That happens to be secular. I say it in that order purposely, as I believe in AA and its steps and traditions, and I don't want to separate myself from AA simply because I am agnostic. If I wanted to do that, I'd be in a different recovery program, but I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous and grateful to be so. When I first got sober, I did over 90 and 90. I found a home group. I got my first sponsor around 45 days in. And we immediately began working the steps, the traditional AA steps. I knew no other steps. She later became my mother-in-law, and she has since passed away. But when she became family, I found a second sponsor who I'm still with today. And she happens to be Christian, and she's well aware that I'm agnostic. It's never, ever interfered with us working the steps together. We don't care what each other's beliefs are. It was actually the same way with my first sponsor as well. Our individual higher powers or belief systems never got in the way of working the steps. And my sponsor today, at the beginning, she said to me, Suzanne, how healthy do you want to be? And I said, I want to be as healthy as I can be. And we were off and running. I've worked the steps so many times, I've lost count. Each time I worked the steps, I learned more about myself. And I worked them twice with my first sponsor. And multiple times I've gone through the steps with other women. You'll have to excuse me. I have COVID, so my voice might go out a little bit. Anyway, when I sponsor someone and guide them through the steps, I do them at the same time. So I do them a lot. I'm very passionate about the steps. With my current sponsor, I've done the AA steps using the big book and the 12 and 12, the little red book, for those of you who've heard of that one. And then we went on to 2 sets of CODA books, and now we're working on a 12-step book that has to do with forgiveness for a couple of resentments that even after doing the steps all these times, I can't seem to get past. And life happens and you get new ones. So I get new ones. So we're going to do that. But always when I'm in crisis mode, we turn back to the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous as they are written in the big book. It's easy for me to find each step quickly. I've written them in the margin of the big book so I can reference them. I've written the principle behind each step in the 12 and 12. And we learn the principles together as well. So neither of my sponsors ever asked me to believe in God. They never shoved any religion down my throat. And in the respect of spirituality, all they asked of me was to never make an individual person my higher power and to get over myself, basically to understand that I'm not the center of the universe and that there are things out there that are greater than I am. So that said, this is how I work the steps as a member of AA who happens to be secular. Step 1, honesty. God is not mentioned. I had to stop lying to myself and admit I was an alcoholic, realize all the ways my life was unmanageable. I wrote them down. I read them to my sponsor. We discussed them. Then I wrote down the 3 worst things that I never wanted to happen to me again, things that happened while I was drinking, things that thankfully made me hit my bottom. I put those 3 things away in my purse and in my car. And if I ever craved a drink, I could read them, I could remember, and not take that drink. I put my sponsor's number, her sponsor's number, and other women's in recovery's phone numbers on speed dial. And I promised my sponsor if I ever wanted to take a drink, I would call her first and give her 10 minutes of her time to talk me out of doing it. Step 2 was hope. God per se is not mentioned. And I came to believe in my multiple and fluid higher powers. I looked up the true definitions of sanity and insanity, and I learned that insanity was doing the same action over and over, but expecting a different result. And I realized that every time I picked up a drink, that was my insanity. I worked on finding powers greater than myself I could believe in because I knew I needed help to stay sober, to restore me to the sanity of sobriety. That I couldn't do it on my own. So I knew the fellowship, AA, the program, could help me. I believed the laws of nature, the universe, the steps, this rock that we're spinning around on, are all powers greater than myself. And in the scheme of things, I am small. Excuse me. COVID also makes my throat dry. Step 3, faith. God is mentioned. I made a decision to stay sober, to never feel the way I felt when I hit bottom and I walked through the doors of AA for the first time. I had no problem changing the word God to my higher powers because I wanted to be free of the bondage of self. I wanted to know how to maturely deal and solve my difficulties so I could share those challenges and victories over them with the women I worked with in the future in order to help them, to help others. I rewrote the 3rd step prayer as a 3rd step affirmation that made sense to my belief system as an agnostic, but to include those ideals. Step 4, courage. God is not mentioned. Since I have a moral compass, I don't take objection to the word moral. I know that some people do. Moral is defined as, quote, concerned with the principles of right and wrong behavior, end quote. My inventory was done in the 3 columns, just like the big book shows. I started with resentments and went over them one by one with my sponsor. We discussed them until we found my part in each and every one. I had some trauma-related, truly justified resentments, but I still had a part in them. It took me a while to see that, but I understand that now from the work. And I went on to make a fear list, and I discussed what the origins of those fears might be. The sex inventory was really part of my resentment inventory, so I didn't do that separately. Then I made an asset list. I was taught that we all come into AA with gifts and good things about ourselves. I had forgotten what those things were, and Although I needed to demolish my ego, I also needed to understand my low self-esteem could be lifted up by seeing the good things about myself. I actually found the asset list more challenging than my inventory. Initially, it was blank, and I had to have a lot of help from my sponsor to fill that in. But after finding out the part I had in all my problems, the asset list really was a good thing because it was a balance. Step 5, integrity, trust, God is mentioned. So I had already gone through my step 4 work with my sponsor in detail, but now it was time for me to tell the rest of my story. Let go of the secrets I harbored, things I swore I'd take to the grave, things I felt guilt, shame, or embarrassment over so strong I couldn't bear the thought of speaking them aloud. So I told those things the first time around to my sponsor and to my psychologist. My current sponsor, she knows now everything about me. And when I work with others on their 5th step, I share something back to them from my 5th step. And that's how I believe we learn integrity and trust in this program. I admitted to myself that these things had actually occurred because I had blocked them. So I had to admit them to myself. And then as far as admitting them to God, well, what I did was sit out under the sunrise, the sunset, the stars. I spoke the words into the air. I took my inventory and I burned it. And I watched that smoke from my inventory go up into the air. And my words were carried away on the wind with that smoke of the inventory as I spoke my 5th step out loud. And you know, I burned sage. I burned it all around my body as a cleansing, and I meditated on the work that I had done so far. Honestly, the 5th step set me free. Step 6, willingness, God is mentioned. I became willing to work on changing my character defects that I discussed with my sponsor in step 4. I decided to work with her to change them into better behavior. So I made a list of my character defects, and next to each one, I wrote the behavior I'd rather have as a personality trait. I also enlisted my psychologist to help me with this step, and she still does to this day. And I didn't expect, as an agnostic, God to remove my character defects magically, as Riley put it, but I became willing and ready to grow and change and to do this work continuously in whatever ways I can. Step 7, humility, God is mentioned. I don't believe there is one true male God deity. However, as an agnostic, I have a belief system that incorporates more than just my own mind. I believe that being humble helps me stay sober. So I rewrote the 7-step prayer as a 7-step affirmation to suit my beliefs and to put energy out into the universe with the hope that I will become a better person, stay a sober person, so I can help others and have a better life. Step 8, responsibility, God is not mentioned. I'd already done step 4, but it wasn't enough. I harmed many people I did not resent. So I listed them out on paper. I listed how I harmed them. I discussed that list with my sponsor, and I became willing to make amends to them all. Step 9, retribution, God is not mentioned. So using step 4, 5, and 8, I actually categorized my amends. Ones I could make direct amends to and feel comfortable doing that pretty quickly and right away, actually. Those I was willing to make amends to, but they had to be more indirect, living amends or creative amends. And these were for people who had either died or I could not do direct amends with because it would harm others. And finally, I listed those who I felt I would never, ever, ever make amends to because I couldn't find it in myself to have that forgiveness or whatever it took to make amends. I needed to do that work. Riley said brutal. It can be, but it is also very freeing. And eventually, after 3 years, all my amends from my original inventories were made. And some are living amends that will continue forever for the rest of my life. Amend means to change. It's not just saying I'm sorry. I had to learn that. And some amends were received well, others not so well, and it's not about the way they're received. It's about me being accountable for what I had done. Step 10, perseverance. No God is mentioned. Excuse me. Life continues after the first time I worked the steps. It continued. And I make mistakes. I harm others. I act like a jerk. And I try to live in steps 10, 11, 12. Step 10 is very important to me. I know when I screw up. Usually I know my part in it, and I have to take action right away to be accountable and make amends. My personal rule is that if I cannot figure it out after 3 days on my own, if I'm not sleeping, if it's eating my lunch, if I'm feeling physically ill when I think about a situation, then I call up my sponsor and we do a fourth and fifth formally just on that situation. And she helps me figure it out. Step 11 is spirituality. God's not mentioned, just prayer. Prayer to me is an affirmation, a spell, ritual. I like these things. They put substance to my seeking of spirituality. Spirituality to me is anything that fills my heart with awe, anything that gives me a shift in the way that I think or see things for the positive, more positive way. It's one of my favorite steps because it's a seeking step. I meditate because it calms me, and much like sleep, I can discover answers and creative ideas in that calm. I love the words in the Serenity affirmation, as I refer to it, and I write my own affirmations. I give thanks to the universe, to the trees, to the stars for my life, my sobriety. I write and I read gratitude lists and goal lists. I consider all these things a form of prayer. To me, prayer is simply good energy, regardless if I'm talking to myself or not. I believe it's energy going out there into the universe for good reasons. And I'm happy if somebody who's religious prays for me. I feel it's good energy directed towards me. I don't have to believe in their God or their religion for it to be good energy directed towards me. And I think it's special if they pray for me. Why not? I read about different religions because I find them interesting. I listen to Joseph Campbell because I love his outlook. He's gone now, but I love his outlook that he had on spirituality, myth, and religion. And to quote him, every religion is true one way or another. It is true when understood metaphorically. But when it gets stuck in its own metaphors, interpreting them as facts, then you are in trouble, end quote. I am agnostic in the true definition of the word. I have proof of nothing, and I have no non-proof of anything. I'm not the center of the universe. I don't know. I seek. And step 12, service. God's not mentioned. I take no objection to the word spiritual. I have a new spiritual awakening every time I do the steps, and they help me grow. Every time I work with another woman on the steps, I have a spiritual awakening. As I said, to me, anything that fills my heart with awe and love is spiritual, and all that is spiritual is sacred to me. I believe in service commitments both within AA and in the community, and I do both. I sponsor, share, speak to carry the message of sobriety, that if we have a desire to stop drinking, we can find sobriety in AA without having to accept anyone else's beliefs or deny our own. With the help of my sponsor, I learned the principle behind each step, as I mentioned, and I made a list of those principles, and I read them every single day. I try through the actions I take. I try to practice those principles in all areas of my life. I practice, I fail, I practice again, I progress. I am, as they say, a work in progress. So in conclusion, I am a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm an agnostic, I'm secular. However, because of working the steps of AA, I can sit in any AA, NA, CODA, or Al-Anon meeting anywhere in the world and relate, share, and discuss regardless of the format of the meeting. I learned how to find similarities, not differences. I put aside the anger, the whatever about people who push God or religion. I just, the blinders, I turn them off. I found my program. And by working my program, I hope to never become complacent and never go on a dry drunk. And most of all, never pick up a drink again. I keep working the steps because it is worth it. AA, Alcoholics Anonymous saved my life, and the steps set me free. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you. Thank you,
Very good,
Suzanne.
Suzanne. Thanks so
Thank you,
much.
Suzanne.
Thank you, Riley and Suzanne.
Thanks,
both.
Suzanne.
It was great. Okay, so we're going to open this up. Open up the for sharing. I ask that you use the raise hand function, so that and if you're on a phone, that's *9 to raise your hand, and we'll call on you in order. And I ask that you unmute yourself so you can share. And otherwise, please stay muted. We also, by the way, you should be able to save this chat file on your computer if you're on a computer. I don't know how you do it on the phone, but you can do it on a computer, so that you'll have all those links if you want them. And again, remember, this is being recorded, so keep anonymity in mind. Would anyone care to act as our timekeeper? So all you have to do is keep the time on when people are sharing. And if they get up to 3 minutes, just start doing this so they'll know they need to start wrapping it up. We got somebody who'd like to do that? Or will do it if you don't, whether you like to or not. Anybody? Oh, Joe, did you raise your hand? Okay, thanks, Joe. All right. Let's see. Just a reminder, we as free thinkers try to keep an open mind and appreciate other people sharing. And so we ask that you not share in a way that disrespects or tries to dissuade anybody else. And a reminder, our next Free Thinker meeting will be not Free Thinker meeting, but our next workshop will be at the end of next month. We're going to have Dr. Carl Eric Fisher, who's a psychiatrist and the author of The Urge, Our History of Addiction. Should be a great pitch. I think what we're going to do is just try and have a conversation. And that's it. So I'm going to go ahead and start calling on people. And our first one will be Dave G.
Yeah, thanks, John. Cheers. Yeah, really interesting perspectives from both the speakers, and thanks, for what both you said. I don't know how old you are, Riley. Yeah, I stopped drinking when I was 27, and I haven't drunk since then. And it's been skipping through the fields since. No, I'm only joking. It's not been. It's Dakota. It's just been life, really. But yeah, the question I'd like to ask is, what, if there's time for just both, just answer brief or whatever, but what actual things have you done? Not feelings wise, it is good to get a different way of feeling, but what have you actually done that you would never have been able to do if you hadn't have stopped drinking? I'm just interested because there's things that I have done today that I'd never ever be able to have done if I continued drinking. I'm just curious regards that.
Suzanne, would you like to answer that? And maybe then Riley can if he wants to.
I would love to, but I kind of missed the actual question.
He's wanting to know what you have done that you would not have been able to do had you not gotten sober. I believe that's correct. Is that right, Dave?
Okay.
Yeah, it's John. Actions wise, Suzanne. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Okay. What have I been able to do sober that I would not have been able to do if I was still drinking? The first thing that comes to mind for me is that I have Guillain-Barré syndrome, GBS, which paralyzed me for 2 months in the hospital. I couldn't move my arms, my hands, my feet, my legs. I couldn't swallow. I still don't have any feeling in my feet, in the very, patches in my hands. I'm unable to do the things I used to love to do, like run and hike. I would have never gotten through that disease that is chronic and will be with me forever if I was still drinking. That's the first thing that comes to mind. I also couldn't have gotten remarried and had a healthy marriage, start a business with my husband. That's what comes to mind for me. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Suzanne. Riley, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I have a long-term relationship today that's actually become something that's very, I just was not capable of sustaining something like that in the past. But I mean, bigger than that, I mean, I was at the point in my life where I was very quickly running out of options of where I was going to end up. And if I had stuck with using, I think I'd probably be homeless in San Francisco right now. And so at least now I have the opportunity to live somewhat of a life as long as I continue down this path. So I'm very thankful for that.
All right. Thanks, Riley. Jeb, good to see you.
Oh, thanks, John. My name is Jeb, and I'm a grateful recovered addict alcoholic.
Hey, Jeb.
And thank you so much, both to you, Riley and Suzanne, for your shares today. And I have to say to you, Riley, first of all, I love cross-share meetings like this, where we get to comment on other people, because I'm envious, Riley, that you have such insight and mentioned process and behavioral addictions at your age. I had no awareness of those things until I came into AA in my late 30s and then continued. And as I've gotten to know myself, I've become aware of all sorts of things that I have used to distract me from my innermost self, from my true self, and distract me from the best path in life, which AA has offered me. And wow. As I said, I'm envious. I know a lot of people would say jealous, but that means something else. That means that I already possess something. And then Suzanne, I love the fact that you went through the practice of the 12 steps. And that is rare that people talk about how they have applied or do apply it today, because summed up, for me, when I came to AA, they said that I need to pick up the complete kit of spiritual tools and never put them down. That means I never stopped practicing step 1. And when I got step 2 going, I never stopped practicing 1 and 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. So because the 12 step says that I'm supposed to learn to practice those 12 steps on a daily basis so that I and those around me can find emotional sobriety. And that's something I certainly lacked when I came into my first AA meetings. And that's probably why I was there, because I was trying to find a way to have peace with myself, quiet myself, find that gift of serenity. And of course, in that serenity prayer, or what I call the serenity goal, the fourth thing is the wisdom to know the difference. And that's what the fourth step is about. That's the fact-finding process. That's the only inventory process in the 12 steps. So step 10 for me has always been a reminder to go back to asking myself, what is hurt or threatened? Self-esteem, pocketbook, ambition, relationships. And I would go on and on like that, because I'm so passionate about what is offered to us. And and over the years, I continue to pick up a little bit more from how other people apply things. And I will add that one of the most essential pieces that I try to mention every time I speak is on page 83. And he's still talking about the 9th step, or moving into the 10th step, where it says we ask our Creator. In ending our morning meditations, we ask our Creator to show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. And when I realized that the Creator is my innermost self, that indwelling thing, whatever the great reality deep within, then I realized that that's what I'm speaking to and asking for those gifts on a daily basis. And I use that little bit, call it a prayer, many times during the day as a reminder to also give myself patience, tolerance, kindness, and love. So today is only day 15,946. So I'm going to keep coming back because it works. Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Jeb.
Jeb.
Well, Jeb, I just want you to know that I'm at 14,998. So I'll be at 15,000 in a couple of days.
Wonderful, wonderful. Keep saying that.
I hope I never catch up to you.
A day
How
at a
about
time.
Al?
Thanks, John. Thanks, Riley, and thanks, Suzanne. Definitely different ways to look at things. Here I am coming from the other end of the spectrum again. It's an entirely different mindset the way we can look at secular and traditional AA. Traditional AA, right at the top of the steps, they tell you that you're totally incapable of handling your own life. You're beyond human assistance. Only God can do it. This is right before the steps. And then there's God could and would, and you need to find him now. So there's the secular view is a little bit different than that. That doesn't fit agnostics, atheists, and some free thinkers. We all do it a little different. To me, it's so unnecessary. We're talking about secular AA. There are several books that do 12 steps. The reading John did at first should be read at every meeting about the steps and the big book in general. You want to do that mental gymnastics that some people do, that's fine. If you want a overbearing, controlling narcissist for a sponsor, that's great. That shit doesn't work for me. It just doesn't. And Kenji has a wonderful home group. He can speak for himself, but I happen to like his home group. They do Jeffrey Munn's book with a practical 12 steps, and it's rational thought and practical ideas. Nothing about traditional steps are in it. You can certainly comment on it, but it's a great meeting and it's very effective. I'm plugging secular AA, and it's different for everybody. All I'm saying, you don't have to dive in there, the traditional stuff that gets sober. You can come to secular AA and find several. What the heck's his name? Glenn Rader's book, another great book for beginners or people that's been here for a while. There are a lot. The big word here is alternatives, and we're still 100% AA members. You just don't have to conform, or a lot of that stuff is so unnecessary. Come to secular AA. There are different ways, different books, different ideas. This was some guy that was 3 years sober, and he, borrowed not steps, but certainly the principles from the Oxford group. Get yourself a copy of the Oxford group for $2.99. It's very cheap, and find out how this started. It started as religion, or religious, I should say. And some of us run from that. We came over here to get away from a lot of that stuff. And that maybe you didn't, however you work it is fine. Any way you can get sober, I'm for you, 100%. But I'd like to just emphasize there are alternative ways to get sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. Thanks.
Thanks, Al. There's an old saying. There's an old saying, if you ask 4 people in secular AA their opinions, you'll get 5 opinions. Janice?
I'm Janice. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey,
and I'm
Janet.
also an atheist. So I sometimes think I'm somewhere in the middle. I got sober in traditional AA because that's all there was where I was. I was lucky enough to have an agnostic sponsor, and I slid through 2 and 3. I've never been comfortable with 6 and 7. I don't like the word defects. Sometimes those what they call character defects were how you survived the world, and it worked, and then it didn't. But I'm not willing to trash traditional AA, and there are plenty of people who do. I've heard horrendous stuff, and I don't think that's right either. But if I was getting sober today, I'd be doing it now that I know about secular AA. I would be doing it in secular AA. I have one free thinking meeting here, And everything else I've gone to for most of my sobriety has been traditional meetings. And I tend to be the, sometimes I think that I am the token atheist in all of them, because people do get forced. And when people share, sometimes they really share overboard on religion. And I will speak up and say, you know, I don't have a personal God. I have the group of drunks, the fellowship of AA, and service work. You don't have to, I don't want people to walk out the door. Because if I'd heard the 12 steps, I got in late to that first meeting. If I'd heard the 12 steps, I'm not, you know, the first time, and all the God stuff, the first time I walked in the door, instead of hearing people's stories and to which I could relate, I do not know if I would have stayed, no matter how broke I was. So I don't want anybody walking out the door. And in particular parts of this country, having been online now, it's a lot worse than where I got sober. But I did have my third sponsor. I had two that went out on me. Tell me at one point, you have to have a God with a big G. And I did nearly walk out the doors. But because I was doing service work, I had other people to talk to, and I got told, no, you don't have to believe in her God. So it's just some of the meetings since I've been here, I will not go back to again. Some of them I go back to because I have great friends within those meetings, and they all know where I stand. And you know, you have to have something in person. I can do a whole lot of stuff online, but you need people where you are, so that when we get to the point where we can hug each other, we can hug each other. So I do the third step prayer exactly as it's written. I didn't for years. I just avoided it. But my home group, which is a big book study, does it. And I just put group of drugs in there. You know, I grew up on I started out a Christian, and I grew up on the, well, the King James version of the Bible. And I love the poetry. I don't believe anything that's in it, but I love the poetry, and I guess that's what I see when I see the third step. But I never do the seventh. So anyway, that's enough for me. I did appreciate everybody. Everybody has a different point, and that's what I like here. You get to talk about different points. And you don't get told that if you have a problem, it's bothering your serenity, but it's not related to alcohol, that it's an outside issue, and you shouldn't be able to talk about it. You don't get told you can't take medication, you know? And so, but being in secular AA all around the world has made me realize it doesn't matter how you get sober, it's how you stay sober. And however it works for you, if you stay sober, that's all that matters. And that's all.
Thank you, Janice.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Jim.
it. Don.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, John. Thanks, Riley. Thanks, Suzanne. Great talks. And I just want to say I sobered up in traditional AA, like just about everybody who's here, I think, one way or another. And it took me 5 or 6 years in traditional AA to realize that I really didn't believe in the God thing. I came in, I've been an atheist most of my adult life, or an agnostic, I should say. And I take agnostic to mean a person who doesn't know. And so I don't know one way or the other whether God exists or doesn't exist. I think it's an irrelevant question. I started admitting in my home group, which was a traditional group, that what I was, and this lovely lady came up to me after one of the meetings and said, Don, if you just pray a little harder and pray a little longer, maybe you'll get the spiritual thing. And I sort of smiled. I mean, she meant well, and she certainly wasn't trying to convert me to Christianity. But that wasn't me. I stayed with the group for many years. I left about 13, 14 years ago and joined the present group. My present group is also a traditional group, but probably over half of the members are atheists or agnostics. And it's a huge difference. At the first closed meeting I was at, discussion meeting I was at, when I was sharing, I said, you should know up front that I am an agnostic. And half the people in the room looked at me and said, yeah, me too, me too, me too. And funny thing is that people who do follow the religious approach to AA, they had no problem with any of this. They'd all been together as a group for a long time. They accepted each other. And I'm going to underline that, accepted each other, because I think that's the important thing. But what we all have in common is we do believe in working the steps, except curiously enough for my sponsor, who's only ever worked steps 1 and 2. He's 34 years sober. And he's only ever worked steps 1 and 2. That's what he says, and I believe it. And so that thing about it's a suggested program rather than a mandatory program, and it works if it works. He's gotten sober, I think, on the fellowship, and which I think is highly possible. I don't recommend it myself. I do work the steps, or try to work the steps, and all 12 of them, and I certainly go through them with my sponsees. And the approach I take, like Al has suggested, Jeffrey Munn's book and Glenn Rader's book. I prefer Rader, but that's just a preference. I do think that everybody who comes into AA, not necessarily in the first week, but at some point should read the big book and take a look at what Bill is saying about working the 12 steps. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's historically what happened in AA, and but I do believe in working the steps. And I think what the steps are about is taking responsibility. And I sort of think of step 3, and this sort of combining a whole bunch of things. Step 3 is the place where you ask yourself, am I in or out? And or another way of looking at it is, am I willing to take responsibility for my getting sober? And if you're not willing to take responsibility, you've got not a snowball's chance in hell. But if you're willing to take responsibility, this is the way I think about it. If you're willing to take responsibility, you really are ready to take certain steps. And those are 4 to the rest of the program. I've nattered on for long enough, so thank you.
All right, thanks, Don. We got a question in the chat. I got one directly, and I've asked Suzanne if she would read the question and answer it, whatever answer she has for it. Suzanne?
Sure, Suzanne Alcoholic. The question was, what are the principles behind the steps? Is that written somewhere in the big book? So when I was speaking, as I went through each step, I started with saying the principle behind it. So it is the principle, and I will list them real quickly, but I'm going to answer first about whether or not they're in the big book. They are interwoven throughout all the pages of the big book in the 12 and 12. It can be argued that each principle is in every step, but this is the way that I was taught, and it is the way that makes sense to me, and it's the way that I've seen them on the walls of some of the AA rooms that I have been in that do list them. So they are: step 1, honesty; step 2 is hope; step 3 is faith; step 4 is courage; step 5 is integrity and trust; step 6 is willingness; step 7 is humility; step 8 is responsibility; step 9 is retribution or brotherly love; step 10 is perseverance; step 11 is spirituality; and step 12 is service. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, please let me know. Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. Okay, Kenji.
Hi there. Let me start my timer here so Joe doesn't have to cut me off.
Oh, I think he already did.
Oh, okay. Thank you for allowing me to share. I'm an addict alcoholic, a human in recovery, and this meeting has been wonderful today. Both shares were just knocked my socks off. I loved them. And I'm so glad we recorded this because I definitely want to hear those shares again. I wrote down, let me find it here, wrote down Suzanne's, what she said, she has multiple and fluid higher powers. Wow, that was that 5 words that exactly sum up how I look at it, how I feel it, how I've integrated it into myself. Early on in my recovery, in an earlier iteration of my recovery back in the 80s, I found a We Agnostics group. This was mid-80s in Los Angeles. And the founder of that group was a guy named Charlie Polachek. And he would say that, at that time he was about 15 years sober. He said he came in an atheist and 15 years of sobriety had made him a better atheist. And then he'd go on to say there was no step that he couldn't work as an atheist. And that really widened the gamut for me a lot. I probably forgot that he had said that for a long time and tried my best to work the steps formally exactly the way it was laid out in the big book and the way people taught it at the meetings I went to. But at this point in time, I found my own way to kind of navigate my way through the steps. I don't have to throw out any steps. I don't have to necessarily reword them, but I have my own way of doing them. I mean, basically, the first step is realizing I have a problem. I knew that when I came in. The second step is realizing that that's not the end of it, that there's hope here, there's a solution. That was obvious by looking around at you guys. I was less clear that it was going to work for me, but it was clearly working for other people. And the third step was just making the decision to go with it, to go with the hope and suspend my disbelief that this wouldn't work for me and give it a try. It's kind of like the third step, well, maybe the whole first 3 steps are kind of like taking a couple of bounces on a high dive board before to kind of get up the guts to go. And it seems like step 6 and 7 might be the same thing, taking a couple of bounces before leaping into the amends process, the cleaning up the past. I see it's been 3 minutes. I'll cut myself off. This has been a fantastic meeting, and it's totally, once again, secular A has proven to me that this thing can work secularly just as well as it works for people who have more of God consciousness, are more religious members, as Appendix 2. And one final thing, Al mentioned my home group. I have several home groups. The meeting he was talking about was Stonehenge Steps on Wednesday, which you'll find on the meeting list. Thanks.
Thanks, Kenji. Kat.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kat Little Creek. I'm an alcoholic. I think you guys did so well. Both of you, Suzanne and Riley, are 2 of my very, very favorite people in this group. And I was just so happy to get to listen. It's my belief that we all come in here different. We have a common problem and we have a common solution. We're alcoholics who can't stop drinking. And if we put the alcohol down, we have a chance at a life. But beyond that, we're very, very different. And all of the ways that sobriety is offered, I believe, are necessary. Because like I said, no two of us are exactly alike. And I am so grateful that I've had the opportunity to walk down several paths over my years of sobriety, that there have been different people willing to do different things with me. and the opportunity to share those different things that I've found with other people. You know, bottom line, I didn't have a clue how to have relationships with other human beings when I got here. And it's the only thing I ever wanted. And allowing you people to share with me all the things that you have about your own lives, about how you get from A to B, about how you live with joy and pain and suffering, endings, beginnings. You've taught me how to live, and I am so grateful. And like I said, I'm so proud of you too. You're young ones in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and you give me hope that as our program changes, and it's going through radical changes right now. You know, I've been a part of this program before Secular was a part of AA, and watching it shift and bend right now, we need the young ones who are coming in with the love of the program that both of you share. And I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for both of you, and thanks for letting me share.
Thanks, Kat. Well, I don't have any hands up. Is there someone who's kicking back thinking, I don't want to share? David.
Thank you all so much. They were great shares. I got a lot out of them, a lot more thinking. That's the only trouble. A lot more thinking, but a very broad topic that came to mind for me at the moment, because I've kind of found secular AA in the last few months. Really, came into AA in the mid-90s. Is that I love the open-mindedness about secular AA, kind of willingness to listen to everyone's point of views, no matter how different they are to our own. There's a button there, I think, for me at the moment, is I feel comfortable, and probably the word is safe, if it's built around the 12 steps. And yet there's a part of me, maybe an adult part of me, that says, well, you know, if you're in a Buddhist country, they might adopt the Buddhist eightfold path and use 8 steps. And that would be fine if it works. I suppose, and other religions and other parts of the world would approach it differently. But I suppose for me, there's a kind of deep inner meaning, psychological, emotional, and moral, that Bill stumbled across in various ways, obviously through the Oxford group, but elsewhere as well, within the 12 steps. So that's where I kind of not draw the line, where I'm comfortable, how I or we interpret the 12 steps, you know. And that, I'm okay with that. And maybe I'll change as time goes on. I don't want it to kind of feel like just group therapy for me, you see, I suppose. That's my job. I'm a therapist, and it kind of that does dilute it for me. And maybe I'm just being childish, you know. The other thing that comes to mind very briefly is that in William James's Varieties of Religious Experience, he actually does quote, "May all the higher powers of the universe release you from the hell in which you once lived." Higher powers with an S. And I love the fact that Bill sat there in late 34 or probably 35 and read those words, and it gave him some comfort, you know. But that was great. Thank you both very much. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Always good to hear you. Catherine.
I am Catherine. I'm an alcoholic, and I've been in AA a long time, since way before secular AA. And the steps gave me a path to follow, and I needed that, but I really struggled with it. And I never really understood why I struggled so much with it until just the last few months, where I've come to understand that, you know, what I thought I believed in is in terms of a God, I didn't really believe in. I believed in what I was taught about social justice. I believed in what I was taught about the principles of my then religion. But, and so I think I really struggled with, it's like, well, where is this spiritual experience? What does it feel like? What's it supposed to be like? So that's kind of me. Another thing I've thought about it a lot is that I've learned more from my sponsees about the steps and about AA than I can ever ever, imagine. And I never thought it was going to be that way. And so that's been a great revelation for me. The other thing I wanted to mention is, I don't know if many of you have heard this expression, step zero, but I was taught about this in a step study group that I went to for a long time. And step zero is if you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it. Because if you don't have that, you don't get to step one. And it took me a long time to get to that point, to be in step one. And because I didn't understand the problem. I didn't understand the problem that I had until somebody literally kind of took me under their wing and put me in the hospital when I was about ready to commit suicide. And so those are my takes. Thank you, Suzanne and Riley. I really appreciate what all you had to say. You did a great job. Thanks.
Thanks, Catherine. Ultiwa. Tim, how is things in downtown Ultiwa?
Oh, it's beautiful and kind of warm for April at Ooltewah, in the mid 80s, which is really early in April. I would like to thank both the speakers. They were both wonderful. And I particularly was taken by what Riley said, which took me so long to learn in AA, that I was an addict long before I used drugs or alcohol. And it probably took me more than 3.5 years to realize that even though I had found some sobriety from not drinking alcohol, which made me a lot healthier and a little more sane, and but I could still be crazy and emotionally unsober and nuts without embracing more of the program and seeing the need for more change. So I think that's a wonderful revelation for someone at the age of 20. I'm certainly jealous that, it took me 30 or 40 years of dabbling with alcohol pretty damn heavily and causing difficulties for me until it finally ran me off into the ditch horribly as a full-blown alcoholic, and having to give up and try AA to give something else a chance, as my doctor said. So, but I have that same difficulty you talked about, Riley, of I can be obsessively compulsive about a bunch of crazy things. One of my addictions I pursued over the last 10 years that was just stupid was entering prices into gas buddies. So I've tried to avoid those crazy things and just do more productive things and live a more emotionally sober life. And I think that's a wonderful revelation that you talked about. Thanks.
Right. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks. I think we had the next person was Jen. Pardon?
I guess this today's topic was doing the steps in not the secular way. I'm not sure the specific, but it was definitely the steps.
Yep.
And I guess I could contribute. I guess I could contribute a little bit by saying I came in through secular AA. Oh my God, is my home group from Orlando, Florida, and they had a copy of the little book with all these secular steps, but nobody suggested actually doing them that way. And also I had a copy of the book AA, the unofficial guide by that fellow over in the UK. And they had agnostic steps in there. My sponsor took me through the steps the same way his sponsor took him through the steps. And his sponsor was not agnostic or atheist. So we used the 12 and 12. And all I did was read the chapters in that book and would meet with him, and we would kind of discuss what it said. But at the end of it all, what he was trying to do with me was have me understand the principle behind the step. So none of that other stuff came up as far as wording and meaning and or any of that. Yeah, so that was my experience. Today, I take my sponsees through Jeffrey Munn's versions. I find that much easier. So that's all I have. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Jen. Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff, alcoholic.
Hey, Jeff.
I want to thank both Riley and Suzanne for their little chats on how they did the steps so secularly. I've been very impressed with, and other people have said this already, with Riley's maturity in AA at this point, at his young age. For some reason, I thought he turned 21 this year, but maybe I got it wrong. And I told someone else he was 21. But it's just I just find it amazing, and I really liked what both Riley and Suzanne said, and the emotional, in particular, what Riley said about emotional sobriety and finding other things to get hooked up on that really sort of take over. And I've done that myself, and have had to back off and saying, hey, what are you doing here? Let's get back to basics. What's really important. And the other thing with Suzanne was that I sort of commiserated with her about pain in late 21 and at late 20 and then early 21, when I had a fracture in my back, and I had very difficulty walking and had to get beyond that, and it was sort of coincidental that I ended up in a treatment center, and I had my walker there, and I learned how to ask people for help that I never would have done before, for things like take my tray to the table I was going to eat my dinner at or breakfast at or whatever, and so I'm still having some difficulties, but not the pain. I don't have the pain at all. And now I'm back to where I was beginning of COVID, that I need to have my right knee replaced because I can feel the pain in the right knee now coming back, because before there was other pains that didn't bother with me. So thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. Well, I don't see any more hands. I know you're not feeling well, Joe, but do you have anything to add?
Yeah. Thanks, Suzanne, Riley, and everybody for a great discussion. I remember being 20 and sober. Some of the others in here do too, and I too found your presentation, Riley, super articulate and very fair-minded. Wonderful. And yeah, looking forward to next week or next month, next week also. And that's enough for me.
Okay. Well, that worked out pretty well, actually. Oh, Catherine, I guess we aren't going to end it. Catherine? Kat G, are you there?
Hey, I'm sorry. I just thought a last minute thing. I'm Catherine, recovered alcoholic, or Kat. And thank you very much. Terrific speakers today. And I've been thinking about the idea of behavioral issues. And I thought that's what's behind all of my addiction stuff. It's always been about, you know, what's wrong with my thinking that is creating making me do bizarre behavior, you know, anyway. And that's something I have to look at a regular basis, and how important it is for me to be able to see whether what I'm doing is destructive, whether it's harming me or anybody else. And there were a lot of years where I would just tell myself I'm not drinking, so it's okay. But I wasn't okay. I just wasn't drinking. And so I am usually aware of my thinking. And because of that, it means that my behavior is usually pretty sound and I don't end up having to make amends anywhere. And I like it that way. Thanks.
Thanks, Kat. The other thing that reminded me was my sponsor always said that, you know, just reading them won't get it done. You actually have to do them. I kind of didn't like that when I heard him say that, but so the last reading here is: the opinions expressed here tonight are strictly those of the individuals expressing them. What you've heard here was spoken in confidence. It should be treated as such. We share to help ourselves and each other, so we welcome everybody's experience, strength, and hope. Many of us have found that when we consider what we've heard with an open heart and an open mind, we gain a better understanding of ourselves and each other. We also learn how to handle our day-to-day problems better. Since members often share both trials and triumphs with each other, please let there be no gossip or criticism, but only love and appreciation, understanding, and companionship. And the last thing we like to do here is share the, if you want to, you can unmute and share along with us the responsibility statement. If you'd like to, who is responsible? I am responsible.
When anyone,
anywhere reaches out for help, I want the hand of AA always to be there. And for that, I am responsible. Yeehaw. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much
John.
for putting this workshop on. This was awesome.
Thank you, John.